Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to our next series of the Richard L. Thompson Lecture Series. We are going through 6 of Richard L. Thompson's books, also known as Sariputta Das. We're covering chapter by chapter with a lecture summarizing the content and highlighting the chapter's messages, and then following with a discussion. So on June 10th, we finished Mechanistic and Non-Mechanistic Science, an investigation into the nature of consciousness and form. That was published in 1981. And today we're beginning the second book of our series. It was also his second book published, Vedic Cosmography and Astronomy, published in 1989. And we'll begin with an introduction to this series by Brahma Tirtha Das, Bob Cohen. He's going to open this up. Bob Cohen has received an MS in geology from Rutgers University in 1975. He's been a member of the Bhaktivedanta Institute since its inception in 1976. And he's giving a presentation at their first International Conference of Life Comes from Life in 1977. He's also working on multiple projects. He worked on multiple projects with Sariputta from 1995 through 2008, and now serves as the director of the Bhaktivedanta Institute for Higher Studies. We're here at the headquarters in Gainesville, Florida. And today he's going to explain why our institute is sponsoring this lecture series on the books of Sariputta. Thank you, BT.
Welcome. Sorry for a little technical problem. In the world, we come across very smart people all the time. In fact, Prabhupada's vision for the Bhaktivedanta Institute, he said to Sri Damodar when he was beginning it, "We dance in the streets in colorful clothes, but how are we going to attract intelligent people?" And he gave a challenge to us. Let us attract intelligent people. He told Sri Damodar, begin this institute to really go deep into the intellectual issues. And that's how our institute began, with that idea. The shortage in the world today, and I'm going to use this term loosely with some description, is Brahmins. There's an idea of the universal body. The head does the intellectual work, the arms do the protection, belly does the economics, and the feet do the labor. It's called a Varnashram system. So it begins with the head. So the purpose of the Bhaktivedanta Institute is to give people who have an intellectual bent a place to really discuss the very deep and important issues. It's not to say that intellectuals are better than workers or protectors or anyone else. It's to say that everyone has their own function in society. And among the many intellectuals I have met, it's rare that we find a genius. And Richard L. Thompson, known to us as Sariputta Das, was one of those rare geniuses. What does a genius do that an ordinary person doesn't do? They integrate. They take information from diverse sources, combine it together, and come up with amazing conclusions. As the story goes, true or not always remains to be seen, but Einstein was sitting on a train. And some of you, probably most of you, have had this experience. And the train next to him appeared to be moving. And I've had this experience where I can't tell if my train is moving or the one next to me is moving. And so you have two trains, which is moving? And after a while, you can figure it out. And seeing that, Einstein had an amazing understanding of relativity, came up with a special theory of relativity, and later on, that was 1905, and a decade later, his general theory of relativity. So that's what a genius does. takes the information which all of us have seen every day and takes it a step further. So Sariputta was, Richard L. Thompson, one of those rare geniuses. In Western philosophy, basically everything in Western philosophy is a series of footnotes on Plato or Socrates, Aristotle, the Greek philosophers. Everything was built on what they did. Similarly, at the Bhaktivedanta Institute, much, not all, much of what we do is built on the genius of Sariputta, Richard L. Thompson. Sometimes we'll find ways to improve what he's done, sometimes correct it, enhance it, or get deeper understanding. But it's all, as Western philosophy is built on the Greeks, what we do is built on his work. In the particular book today, Vedic Astronomy and Cosmology, we're going to try to clarify the relationships with the prominent systems of cosmology, both ancient and modern. And Prishni, our board member and chief of our cosmology section, is going to go into more detail on this. Now, we're back now. We have this phenomena that some Indian astronomers basically reject Puranic cosmology, and then we have Western astronomers also reject Puranic cosmology, or the claim that it was all borrowed from the Greeks. And what we're trying to do in this book is look at it scientifically and realistically and remove all the political overlays that unfortunately pollute scholarship. The thesis Sariputta put forth in this book, and Prishni is going to go into more detail, is that the astronomical Siddhantas and the Puranic cosmology can be understood as mutually compatible. And the example that he gives is trying to understand light. Is it a wave or a particle? And the answer is, it's both. And it takes a genius to integrate that. I'll give you a little example of how we look at things. Here is a stick of incense. Now, that doesn't glow very well. We'll make it glow a little better. As we get ready to burn down the house. Okay. Now, when you're looking at this, you see a point. But if I go like this, you're going to see a circle of light. A little hard to see, but it's there. Now, is this a point or is it a circle of light? And depends on your point of view, and it depends on your time scale. If you have a very slow time scale, it's just points of light. If you have a very fast time scale, it's a circle. This kind of process is what Sariputta applies to understand what Vedic cosmology is about. Depends on the point of view we're looking at things. That requires an integrated approach. An integrated approach is something that we generally reserve for our geniuses. So if you stick along this ride of Vedic cosmology and astronomy, you'll get a few results out of this series. One, you're going to understand Vedic astronomy and modern astronomy much better. You're going to see the integration. You can see how Vedic astronomy gives us insights into modern astronomy. Modern astronomy gives us insights into Vedic astronomy. Two, you're going to change your thinking process. You're going to be able to think in a more integrated way. And you're going to get into the mind of a genius and see how a genius resolves these apparent discrepancies and contradictions. So this is a wonderful, adventurous ride. Now, how did this book begin? Well, when Prabhupada founded our Bhaktivedanta Institute, he gave a challenge to the sciences. Try to figure out some of these mysteries. In the 10 cantos of the Bhagavatam, 12 cantos, but the 10th canto is the most intimate part of the Bhagavatam, in which Bhakti Yoga, the essence of it, the really deepest essence is presented. And we work our way up to it, going through 9 cantos. And the 5th canto serves as our speed bump to force us to slow down and learn how to think deeper. And it really does that. Anyone who reads it will have to slow down and say, what's going on here? And that's where the genius of Sariputta takes us on the path to resolving these mysteries, which we'll be working on for the next hundreds of years, but we can see the path leads to success as you read this book. So this book was personally commissioned by Prabhupada for the BI to write. And this is the first volume, and the second volume goes into more detail called Mysteries of the Sacred Universe. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to our Prishni. Now, to introduce Prishni, I'm going to have to add some things for the sole purpose of embarrassing her. She's not only one of the founders of our revival of the Institute, she is our mathematical whiz. She can analyze the mathematics of planetary motions and of cosmology in a way that few can. And she has a particular ability to integrate apparently conflicting points of view. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Prishni, and today's presentation will focus in more detail on the introduction to Vedic cosmology and astronomy. So please enjoy the ride, and welcome again to the Bhaktivedanta Institute. For those that are here for our first presentation, you're here for the first time, I want to say we're broadcasting from our main library and boardroom at our headquarters in Gainesville, Florida. As you can see, this is just a small piece of our extensive library. And we have this beautiful house, that's our headquarters, donated to us. That used to be the mansion for the president of the University of Florida. So with that, everyone welcome, and put on your seatbelts and get ready for the ride. Prishni, I turn it over to you. Thank you.
You're sharing the Zoom screen.
Okay. Okay.
So go to stop share.
Another little technical glitch. Sorry about that.
I
Yeah,
had
go
this.
to share screen.
Yeah, but I got the wrong. See, it's not. Yeah. Okay. Now we'll share.
Should vote.
No, it didn't work.
Is it not? Is this share?
I have it not responding again.
You're not looking at it? Okay. Yeah, I guess Zoom is having difficulties today.
Okay. So
Does she have permission to share?
Well, the Zoom stopped responding, so it just the software stopped working.
The Zoom crashed again?
Yeah, Zoom crashed again. Yeah. Okay.
no, still not working.
We hear you. Zoom is working.
Okay,
You
great.
can hear us.
All right. So
Just
Here's the PowerPoint, right? Share.
okay.
you're on.
Your screen sharing is paused,
Okay. What do we should?
but it's not. This is what's. Let me try some things.
Okay, well, while Prishni works on sharing her screen, we're just having some difficulties with
Let's
Zoom
try
today,
something
so
like this.
thank you for your
I'm gonna-
patience. I'll just introduce her. Prishni Sutton, she's going to give our the presentation on Vedic cosmography and astronomy on the introduction. And she has a BA in mathematics and currently serves as the secretary and treasurer for both the BIHS and the Richard L. Thompson archives. So today is
try
just
this
the
right now.
introduction of the book,
Now I'm going to try
which is
screen sharing.
actually really, really interesting. And then for the following chapters, we'll have different presenters, and the schedule for that is on our
Mhm.
website. So we'll just take
And now
another
start sharing.
moment while we get
I'm going to start
this
sharing now.
working,
Oh,
and then we'll get started.
Okay, so now go to share screen.
Well, why don't you work the computer for a moment for her?
share screen. Okay.
Can everyone see what's being shared?
Guys, I'll
Good.
take that for
Okay,
yes.
we got a thumbs up.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
uh,
We can see it.
Sorry for all these difficulties. It's that kind of world we live in now, I'm afraid. I want to thank Leela and Brahma Tirtha for getting all this stuff together and giving a nice introduction. And as Brahma Tirtha said, we're beginning on Sadhuputa's second book he did single-handedly. In between the first one, Mechanistic, and this book, he did work on Forbidden Archaeology as a co-author with Druta Karma. But this is his first book on Vedic cosmology. That was written in the year 1989. That's 8 years actually after he published Mechanistic and Non-Mechanistic Theory. This book was published by the BBT, and it was also put through the review process of ISKCON. So it's a very solid canonical work. Of course, you know, and Brahma Tirtha mentioned this, that Sadhuputta was one of the founding members of the Bhaktivedanta Institute, which was formally incorporated in 1976. So first I'm going to give a little background. Brahma Tirtha gave some. I'm going to go into a little more detail. And this is a quote from Sadhuputta's scrapbook history. This is not on the his archival website, but it is in his physical archives. This is written in 1992. He said this: the topic of doing research on the fifth canto was introduced by Srila Prabhupada in the following letter, which is this. Can you see my? Yeah, this down here. It was very clear at the time that Srila Prabhupada was very serious about this. But in those days, we didn't know how to proceed. Later, the book Vedic Cosmography and Astronomy was written in accordance with these instructions. So that's how this book came about. It took a while because they didn't know how to proceed. He opens the book with this very well-known quote from a letter that was written to Bhakti Swarup Damodar in April 27th of 1976, just a few months before they convened for the first time, all the members who are going to be incorporated as the BI in Washington, D.C., right during the bicentennial, actually, celebration of the formation of America. So I'll read this. It's a very important quote. Now our PhDs must collaborate and study the fifth canto to make a model for building the Vedic planetarium. My final decision is that the universe is just like a tree with root upwards. Just as a tree has branches and leaves, so the universe is also composed of planets, which are fixed up in the tree like the leaves, flowers, fruits, etc. So now all you PhDs must carefully study the details of the fifth canto and make a working model of the universe. If we can explain the passing seasons, eclipses, phases of the moon, passing of day and night, etc., then it will be very powerful propaganda. And another comment that Dr. Singh, that's Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, made at the time, and he writes this in his Perspectives of the BI in 1979. He said, Prabhupada specifically instructed us to build the model of the universe that could later be built full size at the future Mayapur temple and planetarium complex. So this was what was going on in everybody's mind as they were doing this research and working on this book, is that Prabhupada has asked us to study this and build a model of the fifth canto. By the way, the Institute was formally incorporated in December, also in Washington, D.C., with Sadhaput is one of the founding members of that. After this book was published, there was a lot of many letters of appreciation were sent to Sadhaput, but one of my favorites was written by Tamal Krishna Goswami. And one of the things he says in this letter, here's a copy of it here. We actually have this in the archive, so I was able to reproduce it here. He says, the scientists are today's gurus, and science is clearly the religion of the day. I thought that was a very insightful quote. And then he adds, for our preachers to be effective, they need such preaching tools as this book which you have produced. A very nice accolade. And then he actually adds another little thing. He says, there is no doubt that his divine grace is empowering you with special intelligence and strength to fulfill his scientific preaching. There was also a really nice letter by Hridayananda. I had the text for it, but I didn't have a copy of it. We didn't have a actual copy of the letter. But Hridayananda said, I think something that was really nice. And he said, I strongly recommend that your book not only be approved, but vigorously propagated. So he Sadhaput did get really nice accolades from the leaders of the devotional community at the time. Now, after giving that quote from the letter to Bhakti Damodar, Sadhaput immediately goes into a pretty unusual scene. And I'll read the little comment. This is how he starts the introduction. In the year AD 1068, a group of workmen labored to erect an earthen mound about 60 feet high in the Anglo-Saxon village of Cambridge, northeast of London. So here, the hill they constructed is still extant. There's a 60-foot hill. It's just outside of Cambridge today. And then on top of this hill, this mound, they built a stone tower that served as a fortress to protect and consolidate this part of the kingdom, which William the Conqueror had won just 2 years before. And here's an artistic rendition of what the castle. Here's the mound. Here it is here in the painting, and here's a rendition of the castle. So why is he starting this book off like this? Oh, excuse me. He's trying to show what, at this time, what Western or European civilization, which is now, of course, leading the world today, was just beginning to emerge from the debris of previous cultures and societies. So this is just 2 years after William the Conqueror came into England. So this was the condition of Western civilization in this era. Now we suddenly switch, makes an abrupt change. Well, not that abrupt. Here we go. And it suddenly brings in, now same time period, you'll notice, just about the same time, he begins to discuss one of the most famous astrologers from the pre-medieval time, and this is al-Biruni. Abu Rayham Muhammad Ibn Ahmad al-Biruni. He was an Iranian scholar and polymath during the Islamic Golden Age. He has been called variously the founder of Indology, the father of comparative religion, the father of modern geodesy, and the first anthropologist. Furthermore, if you want to know more about this extraordinary person, he was well versed in physics, mathematics, astronomy, and natural sciences, and also distinguished himself as a historian, chronologist, and linguist, with his scholarly objectivity earning him the title Al-Ustad, which means the master, in recognition of his remarkable description of early 11th century India. So a very different thing is going on in the East. This is the Indian subcontinent, and in Europe at the day, during this day. But there's always a little, so here, why is he bringing up al-Biruni? Well, this is brilliant astronomer, astounding intellect, but this is what al-Biruni found. He found that the cosmology presented in the Puranas is very hard to understand. His account of Puranic cosmology closely follows the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Puranas in general. When dealing with this material, al-Biruni frequently expressed exasperation and complete incomprehension, much as many people do today. And he naturally took this as an opportunity to criticize Hindu Dharma and assert the superiority of his own Muslim tradition. And I actually have this book, Albert India. It's still in print. It's a fascinating read if you ever want to get into the old history and see another perspective on this stuff. Remember this, because it's going to come up again, this thing that if Puranic cosmology is incomprehensible, it tends to be used as an opportunity to criticize Hindu Dharma and promote your own, whatever your own, as being superior. So let's keep that in mind as we go through. Now, the next thing Sadaputa brings up in the introduction is he introduces us to the Jyotisha Shastras. So these are works on mathematical astronomy, known as astronomical siddhantas. Jyotisha means luminary, and so it's astronomical siddhantas. These works include historical Indian astronomers, as well as ancient Sanskrit texts such as the Surya Siddhanta, that were said to have been originally disseminated by demigods and great rishis. So here's the one translation, one of the early translations of the Surya Siddhanta by Lancelot Wilkinson in the 1800s, 1841, 61, I think it says there. These works treat the Earth as a small globe floating in space and surrounded by the planets which orbit it. So the points he brings out here in this section of the introduction is that many Indian astronomers of earlier centuries were unable to understand Vedic cosmology, and they were led to openly reject parts of the Puranas, even though the religious and social tradition were based on them. So here we have these again, very, and we'll go through some of them, but very erudite, very intelligent people who were born and raised in the Vedic culture, and they still are having trouble understanding the Puranas, and so the only way they could deal with it was to reject certain parts. And now we're going to go into a few of he highlights some particularly famous Jyotisha Pandits who were dealing with astronomy early. This is the early period, and we're going to see how they deal with some of these topics. He first introduces Aryabhat. And so Aryabhat, he's a celebrated astronomer and mathematician of the classical period of the Gupta dynasty. This era is called the Golden Age in the history of India. So this is 500 CE, during which Indian culture and civilization reached a unique stage of development and which left its deep impression upon succeeding ages. The only work we have extant from this genius Aryabhat is called the Aryabhitya of Aryabhat. And this work is very, it's his magnus opus, and it is his only known surviving work. And it presents ideas that are actually foundational to modern astronomy and mathematics. It's also still used today to make Hindu calendars. And here's a statue of Aryabhat. This statue is, let me see. This statue is, if I can find can't remember where it was. Let's see. It's in the Inter-University Center for Astronomy and Astrophysics in Pune. So he's well regarded both in Eastern and Western culture. The next astronomer to come up is just a little bit after Aryabhat. This is Varaha Mihira. He's an ancient Indian astrologer and astronomer and polymath who lived in Ujjain. And with Varaha Mihira, his famous work on astronomy is called the Brihat Samhita, which means the big collection, Brihat Samhita. And this is an encyclopedic work on architecture, temples, planetary motion, eclipses, timekeeping, astrology, seasons, cloud formation, rainfall, agriculture, mathematics, gemology, perfumes, and many other topics. So here we have another polymath here who's Varaha Mihira, and he's quoted a lot in anyone who's studying Jyotisha Shastra. Next one, 100 years later, one of the most famous mathematicians in the world today, Brahmagupta. George Sarton, who's a leading founder of the modern discipline of the history of science, acknowledged Brahmagupta as, quote, one of the greatest scientists of his race and the greatest of his time. So very famous, very nice Wikipedia article on him if you want to just get a little more about him. And this work right here, this is the what's it called, the Brahma Sputa Siddhanta, which is translated correctly established doctrine of Brahma. Had a huge impact on Islamic mathematics and astronomy, which became very prominent later on. The next, and this is the incomparable Bhaskaracharya. He's probably the most famous of all the Indian mathematicians and astronomers. We skipped ahead about 500 years. This is 1114 to 1185 CE. And here we have a nice statue of him. This is in Patna Devi, where the great mathematician had lived. He wrote a commentary on the Surya Siddhanta called the Siddhanta Shiromani. Here's a little a bit of the treatise in the original form here that is still extant. And here's a wonderful quote about Bhaskaracharya. And this was written in the Bhaskar Prabha. And you can see this is just after his 900th anniversary, which was celebrated in India. Among the galaxies of mathematicians who flourished on the Indian subcontinent, Bhaskaracharya holds a very special place. He wrote a collection of works on mathematics and astronomy, which not only contained many technically brilliant results, but delighted readers with their poetic sophistication, imaginative appeal, and enduring charm. From the simple addition of two numbers to elaborate algorithms accounting for the subtleties in planetary motion, Bhaskar enchanted his audience as much with his lucidity and eloquence as his singular insight, intellectual ingenuity, and skills as a gifted teacher. And we do have several translations have been done of the Siddhanta Shiromani. Bhaktisiddhanta, Saraswati Thakur did a translation of this and the Surya Siddhanta into Bengali. And Dhanivir Maharaj did a translation of these. I highly recommend any of you, if you want to get a flavor of this Bhaskaracharya and see how he really does delight the audience, you should look at his Siddhanta Shiromani. It's really is a delight to read, for sure. Oh, and by the way, Prabhupada does translate the Siddhanta, does quote from the Siddhanta Shiromani in some of his books, especially in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Now I can't read. There we go. Okay, just thinking over here. But why are we bringing up all this wonderful things about Bhaskaracharya? Because brilliant mathematician, one of the best, he could not reconcile the relatively small diameter of the Earth, which he deduced from simple measurements. Anyone can deduce simple to get very simple to get the diameter of the Earth, with the immense magnitude attributed to the Earth by the Puranikas, the followers of the Puranas. So again, even so now we're in the 12th century, still brilliant mathematicians running into this issue. It just won't go away. And so what we had going on, mostly people are just rejecting the Puranas because they don't seem to make sense. Now we come, wait, where did I go? The wrong way. Here we go. Okay, now I have to move this thing. I don't know why this thing is here. There we go. So this is now things are going to take a little shift here with Parameshvara. This is the 14th century, so it's a few 200-300 years after Bhaskaracharya. And he was a major Indian mathematician and astronomer of the Kerala School of Astronomy and Mathematics, and a proponent of observational astronomy in medieval India. Based on his eclipse observations, he proposed several corrections to the astronomical parameters, which had been used since the times of Aryabhat. So brilliant astronomer. Here's his book, the Gola Dipika. Gola Dipika means illumination of the sphere. It's a detailed treatise dealing with globes and the spherical trigonometry, which is used in astronomy. But Parameshvara did something that no one before him that at least I've not come across evidence, had done yet. And he's looking at this Bhumandala. He's seeing that it's 500 million yojanas across. Now he's looking at the Earth, which the Jyotisha Pandits had at about 8,000 miles in diameter, which would come to 500 yojanas in of radius, when you do find the volume of a sphere that is 500 yojanas radius, and any of you mathematicians out there, I don't know, it's a simple formula. If you estimate pi as 3, which a lot of the astronomers did just to get, an estimated value, the volume of the Earth globe comes out to be exactly 500 million yojanas, cubic yojanas. Now, that may be a coincidence, but it's an extremely interesting observation. And he was the first one that really, that we know of, that really tried to show there is information in the Puranas. Maybe this Bhumandala they're talking about, the volume of the Earth sphere. So that was an interesting way he handled it. The next one Sariputta mentions, we're skipping ahead again, almost 500 years here. And this is the Vamshidhar. Vamshidhar is from the 1800s, and he's a highly respected commentator within the legacy of the Vaishnavacharyas. His appraisal of this particular verse, 5.20.38 from the Srimad Bhagavatam, suggests a complexity of perspectives brought to bear in an examination of the apparent dichotomy between mathematically quantifiable visible universe and the descriptions of the cosmos located within the Puranic literature. So he's the one that Sariputta really focuses on. He devotes an entire appendix, as we'll get to later on this particular verse, the translation of this particular verse. And his book, which is a commentary on the Bhagavatam, is called the Ravarta Deepika Prakash, which means illumination of the commentary by Sridhar Swami, who we all know is the oldest and most influential of the Vaishnavacharyas. His commentaries do appear in a compilation of 11 commentaries that Srila Prabhupada used for his translations of the Bhagavatam. And whoa, I'm sorry, I'm not used to this. He's one of the most important and one of the most actively Vaishnav acharyas, and we'll discuss a little more about him when we get to the end of this thing. Okay. Oh, I'm really having trouble with this bar. Sariputta then, before he goes into the chapter descriptions, he gives a very nice summary of this, of what he said so far. And I hope you'll bear with me as I read through this, because I really feel that this summary really puts the entire issue of Puranic cosmology into a not just a lovely perspective, but one which leads to all kind opportunities for research, and so that's why I really want to go through this. Many Indian astronomers of earlier centuries were also unable to understand Vedic cosmology, and they were led to openly reject parts of it, even though their own religious and social tradition was based on the Puranas. So now we've set that scene. There are evidently serious disagreements between the cosmological system of the Puranas and the world models that human observers tend to arrive at using their reasoning powers and their ordinary senses. So here's the issue. Bhagavatam says this, our brain and our senses say something else. The cause of these difficulties is not simply the rise of modern Western science. They have existed in India since a time antedating the rise of modern Western culture. And to some, they may seem to be based on an inherent contradiction within the Vedic tradition itself. This is the issues we're dealing with. Now, this is the important part. The long-standing perplexity that has attended the subject of Vedic cosmology indicates that these disagreements are very deep and difficult to resolve. However, the thesis of this book is that the disagreements are not irreconcilable. The apparent contradictions can be resolved. How? By developing a proper understanding of the nature of space, time, and matter as described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and a corresponding understanding of the Vedic approach to describing and thinking about reality. That's just lovely. And so now I think it really, really sets us up. And then, he gives this lovely, makes this lovely remark, which I think really encapsulates Sadhuputa's thinking, not just on cosmology, but on the whole Vedic research that he did. Our thesis is that the astronomical Siddhantas and the Purana cosmology can be understood as mutually accountable accounts of one multifaceted material reality. Modern Western science is based on the idea that nature can be fully described by a single rational world model. That's the modern, it's reductionist thinking, right? However, the Srimad Bhagavatam points out that no person of this world is capable of fully describing the material universe, quote, even in a lifetime as long as that of Brahma. That's from verse Bhagavatam 5.16.4. Thus, the Vedic approach to the description of nature is based on the strategy of presenting many mutually compatible aspects of one humanly indescribable complete whole. That's bringing tears to my eyes. That's lovely. Okay. And then, I think I went the wrong way again. Yes, I did. Now he goes into it, and I'll try to get through this quite quickly. He gives a little brief summary, as any good scholar will, of the different chapters in the book, so that the reader now has a comprehensive overview of what's going to go on. So we'll go through these quite quickly. Chapter 1 is called the Astronomical Siddhantas. Oh, wait just a minute. I messed up my notes here. Okay, so he begins this description, In chapter 1, we begin our account of Vedic astronomy by discussing the astronomical Siddhantas, Sri Siddhantam, like that. To accept these works and reject Puranic cosmology, as some Indian astronomers have done, is to start down the path of modern scientific materialism, which ultimately leads to the total rejection of the Vedic literature. But to reject the astronomical Siddhantas as anti-Vedic means to lose the Vedic tradition of rigorous mathematical astronomy. And so here he is, and he's just really highlighting this issue that if we take either one of these paths, reject the part of the Puranas or reject part of the Siddhantas, he said this plays into the hands of the modern Western scholars who wish to reject the Vedas and Puranas as mythological. And this is, we saw with Al-Biruni, that was the conclusion he came to. He couldn't reconcile this. He said, well, that must just be mythology. It's a bunch of nonsense. So how we did, this is a very intricate problem that we're dealing with, and Sadhuputta takes this on in this book. Chapter 2, this is called Vedic Physics, the Nature of Space, Time, and Matter. And as he pointed out in the introduction, this is what we have to get some understanding of if we're really going to be able to get into this idea of what the Puranas are discussing in this descriptions of the universe. So to illustrate this concept, Sadhuputta, actually, I got this from a work that we have in the archives. The name of the paper is handwritten. It's called Points Considering the Vedic Conception of the Universe. And he illustrates this concept by, Sadhuputta was a bit of an artist. He liked to draw cartoons. So he drew this cartoon here. And it's a cartoon about Prapti City. Okay. So he says, there's a little caption to this drawing. He says, is an airplane pilot, here's our airplane pilot, likely to see something like this during a period of peak activity by yogis? So here's our airplane pilot. He's up in the sky. Here's a yogi. He's bringing a pomegranate from Afghanistan using Prapti City. So the issue becomes the nature of space. If he's actually somehow creating some kind of extendo hand whiz that goes out to, reaches out to Afghanistan, grabs a pomegranate and whiz brings it back into his room in Vrindavan. Would an airplane pilot see this pomegranate in hand flying through space? The answer is no. So what kind of space are the Vedas talking about? What's a kind of space where objects can be moved from one place to another without passing through the intervening space? And this is a little difficult maybe to conceive, but I think this nice, I like the eyes popping out there. I think this nice drawing really illustrates the fact that, there's something else going on in Vedic space. And what he says here is it'll be necessary to free ourselves from the rigid framework of Cartesian and Euclidean three-dimensional geometry, which forms the basis of modern scientific worldview. So I love that little one. Okay, the next chapter is chapters 3 and 4. He kind of does in one fell swoop. Dang this thing. Okay. Chapter 3 he calls Vedic Cosmography, which really gets into the nitty gritty, and chapter 4, the vertical dimension. And here he gives an account of Puranic cosmology and will show how these ideas develop. The ideas developed in chapter 2 can be applied to resolve. So he's going to try to resolve these apparent contradictions within the Vedic tradition and between the Vedic cosmology and the world of our ordinary senses. So here's a little illustration that he uses in chapter 3. This is Vedic cosmology, cosmography. Excuse me. And this is a little illustration he does of Bhumandala close-up. This is from only 15 million miles away, and you can see the Mount Meru, Jambu Dweep here, and a couple of the rings there. And then for chapter 4, the vertical dimension, he gets into the concept of eclipses, because you need vertical dimension because you have bodies having to pass in between each other. And in there, this is very interesting. He shows it has a couple of these. This is one from the 13th century. Yeah, this is from 1272 AD. This is an Islamic woodcut print of some kind, and this is the angel called Shamhurash, slaying the eclipse dragon. And here you can see the dragon's mouth, and the eclipse dragon is almost like a big serpent, slaying the eclipse dragon. And the little caption underneath there says this eclipse dragon is the Western version of the Vedic Rahu and Ketu. So he gets into some of these cultural comparisons there. Now in chapter 5, this is a very fun read. This is the empirical case for the Vedic world system. So here he said we address the question of whether or not there is any empirical evidence supporting the higher dimensional picture of the universe that we derive from the Srimad Bhagavatam, a la the Prapti City. There has to be some kind of higher dimensionality where an object can go from one point in space to another point in space without passing through the intervening space. So is there any evidence for this? Well, it turns out, he says, that there's voluminous evidence along these lines, although practically none of it is accepted by the scientific community. That is changing, but this is, many years ago. Here's a picture of you get this is a generic picture of Vimana. They're all over the internet. And in this chapter, Sariputta discusses, let's see, this is chapter 5. Okay. He discusses UFOs. That's why we have the picture of the Vimana. He talks about links with traditional lore. And the big part of the chapter is devoted to the events that occurred in 1917 in Fatima, Portugal, which centered on a series of revelations made to 3 children understood to be the Virgin Mary. This is an extremely interesting account. I won't go into it here. The person down the road who does chapter 5 can go into it. But the amazing thing about this particular event is that 70,000 people simultaneously witnessed it in 1917 in Fatima, Portugal. And so and there were scientists there. There were all kinds of people, a lot of Catholics, of course. And there were some extraordinary things that happened during these events when this Virgin Mary would appear before these children, and everybody saw extraordinary things happen. So there's a movie done on it, which is, I can't think of the name, but it's a lovely movie if you want to kind of get a sense of what was going on in this amazing event. Chapter 6, Modern Astrophysics and the Vedic Perspective. We return to Vedic cosmology and discuss a number of controversial topics, another fun chapter, including gravitation, the moon flight, the scale of cosmic distances, and the nature of stars. And here, if everyone recognizes this. This is a famous NASA photograph. This is the official NASA photograph showing the lunar module on the surface of the moon. And Sariputta then adds, Should we expect to see some signs of disturbance on the soft lunar surface caused by the exhaust of the lunar module's descent engine? And this is certainly a legitimate question. And if you follow any moon landing conspiracy theories, and I've watched a lot of that stuff because I find this topic fascinating. This is a serious issue. It does look staged. There's a lot of issues with the flag. There's issues all over the place on this thing. So he gets into the does a whole discussion on the moon landing, which I think is everyone should read. It's very interesting. Chapter 7. Redshifts in the Expanding Universe. Here he surveys the modern scientific evidence regarding the theory of the expanding universe. We not only find that this theory is flawed, but we also find evidence indicating that Newton's laws of motion fail on the galactic level. And this is actually well known today, that Newton's laws of motion fail on the galactic level, and that's why they had to come up with this dark matter and dark energy, because Newton's laws do fail on the galactic level, and so you have to introduce all kinds of stuff to make them work. And here's a picture. I love this picture. This is Hubble. What's his first name? Edwin Hubble, famous American astronomer. He's the one that came up with this whole redshift theory. His work has been totally accepted and is used today. Here he is with the Schmidt telescope at the Palomar Observatory in 1949. Okay. And then chapter 8 is questions and answers. And it's really a very intense chapter, and we'll go through that near the very end of the lecture series. Oh, okay. The first appendix is, as I mentioned, is on the commentary by Vamshidhar. And here's Vamshidhar sitting here very nicely. This is on verse 5, 20, 38 of the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he does a whole analysis of this. It's extremely interesting the way Vamshidhar is the first one who really makes a serious attempt to reconcile. He's a very advanced Vaishnavacharya, and he's also a astronomer. And so when you combine those two things, you get this very strong attempt to want to see that both things are compatible. So his commentary in this verse explicitly discusses the relationship between Bhumandala, as described in the 5th canto, and the small Earth globe of our experience. So this is a very nice appendix, which we'll get to in more detail at the end of this. And appendix 2, the role of Greek influence in Indian astronomy. Now, remember, this was written in 1989. At that time, Western scholars maintained that the mathematical astronomy, the Siddhantas, was borrowed from the Greek and Babylonian astronomy in the earlier centuries of the Christian era. But in this is a very fun chapter for me, because in this appendix, Sadhuputta, who just goes into the math, he makes a few points that show that the quality of the scholars' arguments shows the quality of the scholars' arguments and the nature of the historical evidence used by scholars to present their case. And he does a lovely job of really poking holes in it. He's really kind of going after here David Edwin Pingree. He passed away in 2005, and he's the American historian of mathematics in the ancient world from Brown University, who vigorously propagated this. Indian borrowed their astronomy from the Greeks. This, many years later now, this kind of thinking is not very much appreciated by modern scholars. But in his time, he was arguing very strongly against it. The conclusion that Sadhuputta gives is only a conclusion that Sadhuputta could give. Rather than telling you what we know, he tells you all the things that we don't know. So he gives this amazing list. And in case any of you are looking for something you want to do to help the Bhaktivedanta Institute, here are some. He gives this whole list of things that we need to work on. Number 1, we need a careful study of cosmology material in a wide variety of Vedic literatures. And we're working on that, but it's a never-ending task. So many still need to be translated. So many still need to be gone through. Study of Vedic geographical material, because you'll see this, especially in Mysteries of the Sacred Universe, the cosmology and the geography tie in together. Microcosm, macrocosm. It's a really pretty amazing analysis that will get into the Mysteries of the Sacred Universe. Careful analysis of the theories of Western scholars about the history of Vedic astronomy. This has already been taken up and more work needs to be done, but Stita Muni has done a lot of analysis. He gave a talk on this, I think, at the second cosmology workshop. And this is being written up now in a book that will be published, we hope, by the fall of this year. We need to study ancient astronomical observations. That's going to be difficult, but it needs to be done. Study the dating and the Vedic calendar. That all ties into astronomy as well. A study of empirical evidence relating to Vedic cosmology. That would be a good thing. And the careful analysis of modern cosmology and astronomy. Fortunately, we do have some astronomers and cosmologists on the BI team now, so that's helping a lot along these lines. Modern cosmology and astronomy are very difficult topics to deal with. And then at the very end here, very end of the chapter, he gives this his aspiration. What is it? Why have I written this whole book? What is his aspirations as an author? And he says, it is our hope that these studies will culminate in the development of a Vedic planetarium and museum that can effectively present Krishna consciousness in the context of Vedic cosmology. This, of course, was Srila Prabhupada's plan for the planetarium of the Temple of Understanding in Sridham Mayapur, and similar planetariums can be set up in cities around the world. So you can see the whole thrust from the very beginning of this book, which is that quote of from the letter to Bhakti Damodar, how to make this model, down to the very end here of this introduction. Sadhuput is focused on, because Prabhupada asked him to do it, so he's focusing on doing this model that can be presented in the Vedic planetarium. And there it is. So thank you very much for your patience. Hare Krishna. If you have any questions, I'd certainly be more than willing to answer them. Yes, Rich?
Yeah, turn on screen share.
Okay. Yes, Rich.
My question is, I'm kind of, I like geography and I'm kind of interested in the geography of the universe. And I was wondering, do you think it's possible if somebody like created like a circular spherical globe of the universe or universes, and that way I could see it like where everything is, like the geography of everything. Can that be done, or is that too hard?
Well, we're constantly working on that.
Okay.
And I know someone I can hook her up with. His name is Sulabha.
Sulabha.
Stephen Doyle. He's actually in the process right now of writing a book called Puranic Geography.
Wow.
And so he does a lot of that. Then in Mysteries of the Sacred Universe, Sadhuput also gets into that, where he hooks up. You have sometimes they call them portals or whatever you want to call it, but there's places where the cosmos actually hooks into or matches up with certain features of the Earth. And it's a very interesting topic. If you can stay for lunch, I hope you will, and then we can discuss it a lot more. And I can show you where you can find some of this stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Leela, any questions?
Yeah,
from
I have a
online?
question.
Oh, okay.
I'm next to you.
Yeah. I'll just.
So Ashish Mehta.
Ashish.
Yes. My wife Cheta.
Thanks.
So if you, I think it's a very nice lecture. You work hard on it, didn't you?
I work hard on Sadhuput. He's my hero.
Okay, but I mean on this lecture. But so if you say that 1 + 1 is not equal to 2, then because we have to get past Euclidean geometry. So that, in a broader sense, that's a correct way to look at things, because unfortunately with that you can connect anything to anything. Anything is possible to say, well, there is a contradiction, but that's because we don't know certain things. So that is true. However, for this planetarium that they are talking about building, there has to be, for example, the string theory, which has all these various dimensions. So there has to be a comprehensive model which would replace the present day scientific models, which are limited, to be able to bring these contradictions into a single fold in a quantitative sense or a physical sense, or whatever sense you want. Until we do that, all we are saying is that well, it's possible to correlate to contradictory phenomena because we don't know about those additional phenomena or theories or whatever that exist. So, so this planetarium is a long way off, isn't it?
You brought up what I think is really gets into the heart of Puranic cosmology, and the issue is Puranic cosmology capable of being captured in a single model?
Correct.
That's the issue, and many people say yes, and they're trying to do that. My impression, and I've studied this for years, is that the Puranas, Srimad Bhagavatam, any of the Puranas, are not set up to do that. That's not the intention. And Sadhaputta hints at that. He calls it a multifaceted approach. And I can share this with you at some point. I've done a document where I went through all, Sadhaputta went through his work, and he shows where certain verses of the fifth canto are clearly describing a planisphere model. And that's what they're using, at least so far, as far as I know. The latest model they plan to use for the big chandelier was a planisphere, which is basically the model. It's called the standard accommodation. It's what all the Jyotisha scholars did. So you take Bhumandal and you wrap it around the Earth globe. You have the Dweepas down at the south. You have Jambudvipas, the northern hemisphere. It's a classic model. It's been used for millennia. But then in the museum part, there's many other models that, if you look carefully at the Puranas, are inherent there. And the one of Bhumandal's ecliptic plane is particularly productive. That's the one Sadhaputta used most. And that's where the rings of Bhumandala match up with the geocentric orbits of the planets. So that's another one. Now, back to Rich, there's another model done by I can't think of his first name, Ali. He's from India, geographer in India, where he takes he takes Jambudweep and is actually able to map the description of Jambudweep onto geography of South Central Asia. It's brilliancy, and Sadhaputta discusses that. So you have that, and then of course you have the whole thing of describing the heavenly realms, because that also goes on in the fifth canto, and there's many verses that where these different islands, these ring-shaped islands, are inhabitants for demigods. So we have all these things going on. Can you put that into, those of us think linearly and I'm this way too. I was trained in science and math. So I want to take all this information myself and be able to put it into one model. Einstein tried for his entire lifetime to get a unified field theory, right? Couldn't do it. Certain kinds of information, this is my understanding, are not amenable for a one-to-one correspondence between what's there and what we can comprehend.
Right, but you're saying that a lot of work has been done on the pieces, various components, and their subsidiary models, which eventually may be combined, have been developed to some extent.
Yes.
So that would go in the museum.
Yes, and I think this is my understanding, that the only way you can really, if you try to make the Bhagavatam is a literary incarnation of God. If you try to say, oh, I understand this, and I can lay it out to you here within this finite model, I think there's a little bit of arrogance going on there. And I think our better approach is, Bhagavatam is a literary incarnation of Krishna. How do we understand Krishna? From different perspectives. To one person, Krishna looks like this. To another person, it looks like this. Krishna is multifaceted. And so his universe is also multifaceted. That's how I understand it. Right. And so that's what I would recommend, is if you're going to model this, that we model it along those lines. Just like you're going to have different incarnations of Krishna. It's all Krishna, but some people want to worship Ram. Some people want to worship Nrsingadev. Some people want to worship Parthasarathi. There's so many different aspects of Krishna. They're all Krishna. And you can't say Krishna is not any of those.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
See if there are any questions online.
I don't know.
Any questions or comments from the folks online? We have a comment from Abhinanda.
Says, please unmute. Silent mute? Oh, I that makes too much.
We got kicked out again when we.
You got kicked out again?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. I think we're still connected.
Are we connected? Doesn't look like it. Everyone's gone. No, they're out. They're there.
You can unmute now. Unmute now.
Oh, okay, let's try that.
Okay.
Okay. Can you?
Oh, it's not.
Okay.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any questions? Just pipe up if you do. Going once. Going twice. Okay. And Leela, you want to close us out?
Yes,
Okay.
let's do it.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us today. This was very interesting. Historical, starting with the historical foundation of this and this book. And so we'll be back in 2 weeks, starting with chapter 1. We'll continue this lecture series. For chapter 1, we're going to be hearing from Murli Gopal, Mauricio Garrido. He's going to be presenting on the astronomical Siddhantas. He's earned a PhD in physics from Ohio University in 2010. He served an internship at the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, completed a postdoc at Columbia University, and has taught Sanskrit at the University of Florida. He's been a researcher and associate of the BIHS since 2015. And currently he is in Texas in a new medical physics internship. It's not something else.
Yeah, it's residency.
Residency, yes. Okay, so we'll be hearing from Murli Gopal Das in 2 weeks on July 15, and we'll see you then. Thank you very much. Thank you, Prishni, and thank you, Brahma Tirtha, for the presentation.